What is moral education? I think it can only mean knowing what ought to be your moral principles. And this means religious principles. And so you will have your own way of learning your particular religious principles. But what if you don't have one, as I suspect so many people don't have a religion these days? It is to these people that I am addressing my solution. Obviously, if you're already from a Jewish household, a Muslim household, a Hindu household, or a Buddhist household, presumably you will have sufficiently good values, particularly if those households you come from contain a mother and a father, and one, you are a child of the marriage. But so many people are the illegitimate offspring of their unmarried parents, who will invariably be atheists who have no idea about morality or having principles. And it is only because of an unprincipled government that so many such people have been allowed to have children without any attempt being made to discourage them. So obviously, if you already come from a family with a religion, then you don't need to be taught any moral principles. But what if you don't have? What if your unmarried mother doesn't have a religion? Then it means that you come to school without any idea of morality and what should your moral education consist of. If you don't come from a household that teaches these things, obviously the Noahide laws would come in handy, wouldn't they? Well, they would come in handy even for Christians, since they're the ones who allowed liberalism to take over their society, and now liberalism has rotted away before our eyes. And now nobody's doing anything because they are morally so corrupt that they're not going to talk about it because they think they can get away without talking about it. That's why these public intellectuals won't actually make a program or talk sensibly about any of these things. They leave it to YouTubers, and then they censor YouTubers. So I think we have a pretty good idea that nothing is working properly, because most people in our society, in our Western society, come from the fatherless home of our unmarried mother. And that's why nobody knows quite who they are. They think they can't, they can't even define a woman these days. And now we actually know problem of women in men's prisons and men in women's prisons. That, where you're supposed to put the trans woman in a woman's prison or a man's prison. And so they decide to put this trans man in a woman's prison, and of course this so-called woman will sexually harass and assault the female prisoners, the properly female prisoners in these prisons. So now we come to this crisis of identity of a society where men don't know how to define a woman, and they don't dare. And today there was a report in Zero Hedge in which a woman, a feminist, a Norwegian feminist, could face up to 3 years in prison for saying that men couldn't be lesbians. So it's getting crazier and crazier. And unfortunately for Alison Shabdo, this latest news of insanity and injustice being suffered by Westerners under their liberal government has superseded the injustice of her going to prison over singing satirical songs about the fake survivors of the Holocaust. So if it is true that this Scandinavian feminist could face up to 3 years in prison for stating that men couldn't be lesbians, then I think we're nearly hitting rock bottom now. Now, obviously, men don't know what they're supposed to do because they're not fighting it. Because they don't know who they are and what they're supposed to do. Men are supposed to defend property and their women and their principles, but if they don't have principles, then they can't defend it. So moral education must consist of really the 7 no-hide laws, and that will be common for everybody. It should be universally, globally, the case that all children be taught the no-hide laws from primary school. And these things can be reinforced. So you teach these children the no-hide laws, explaining why they must do this or mustn't do that. Which is easy enough. We can all know what the rules are. And the next step is really to actually test their ability to follow those rules. Obviously, as children, you don't expect them to be murderers or, I was going to say sex offenders, but these days one hears so much about children being sex offenders themselves against each other. So it's getting pretty low. And I don't think that the schools do much. And nobody does anything because not enough people have school-age children. at primary school to care. So this is one of the consequences of having a shrinking population. Nobody cares about the shit education you get at your schools, because hardly anybody has children, and obviously you'd only care if you had children. I should be pleased, I suppose, because all this is pointing to the moral imperative of discussing secular Quranism, but you get people like Rob Dufour who well, he's too cowardly to discuss it, and he doesn't like me pointing out his cowardice and feminized risk aversion. But I'll keep going on because it's necessary for men to realize in what degraded state they are. You can't expect women to defend any of these things because, well, this is not even what they're designed to do. You know, women are just supposed to be, well, material creatures mostly. A few of us can understand abstract ideas, but most women will have to, well, they would have to look to the men who control resources and shun men who don't control resources. This is a fact of life. Too many people, I think that the world owes them a free luncher. They should be valued even though they don't contribute. I remember talking to a homosexual who said he resented the way he was expected to be heterosexual to get any respect at all from women. But then, well, I'm not saying people should be rude to each other, but obviously single men would only be interested in women that they want to have sex with if they're looking for a wife. And I suppose if they're not, they wouldn't be interested in old ladies, although they should be kind to old ladies or women old enough to be their mother. I mean, the point is that was that. I'm sorry, I got a bit distracted. Where was I? No clues. Well, yes, it is. I guess I am a bit sleepy, but I really have forgotten what I was saying. Too long a gap. Sorry about all this dead air. I'm just trying to remember what I was trying to say. Yes, I know. It was teaching about no hide laws to kids. Oh, yes, that's it. Thanks, Howard. It was about, apart from teaching them these laws and why and the reason for them, you would test the ability of children to tell the truth and use their reason. It would be part of their, well, you know, their IQ, I suppose. You as a teacher, I imagine, would want to know which child is clever and which child is not so clever, and this involves how it uses reason. Oh yes, yes. Thank you, Ethlyn, for you. I was indeed talking about women not being particularly expected to be principled, because they have to worry about being able to get their children access to food and shelter. So you don't expect women to, stand on principle too much. So that's why you give them all these excuses when they lie and when they're not, when they can't, or apparently can't understand the rules that most people that men are expected to adhere to. So moral education is really an understanding of the principles of whatever moral system that they adhere to, which they inherit from their parents, which is their religion. But for a large, significant number of people in our society, they will be mostly brought up by their unmarried mothers in their fatherless homes, and they should be taught the Noahide laws and their ability to tell the truth and use their reason will be scrutinized throughout their school years, or, well, for their character, their ability to tell the truth under pressure, even though there is no reward, the ability to form conclusions. And I think a lot of Jews are supposed to be clever because they have in their heads this idea that they have a certain role and they were created for. They are protected by the supreme being who created them for a purpose in a world where there is good and evil, and they are expected to choose good over evil to make themselves fit for admission to heaven. So this is basically the narrative, and then all these rules that they're supposed to follow in order to get to heaven. And whether you believe in God or not, you'll see that this system is hierarchical, and therefore orderly, because it's only when a system is hierarchical that you have a chain of command. You have an unquestionable chain of command. So the moment somebody disobeys an order or fails to pass on an order, you'll know who the weakest link is. And this is the accountability that these intellectuals, these political philosophers, and politicians talk about. And all this has been undermined by liberalism and its lies about equality, making it possible, yes, equality and fraternity and liberty are these conflicting goals? Can you have equality when you know? Can you have fraternity if you don't? If you insist on equality, are brothers always? Well, I suppose the idea is that brothers are supposed to be friends, but actually, the additional idea of hierarchy that you can introduce to brothers is that there is an elder brother and there is a younger brother, and there should be a way of treating. I mean, the whole idea is that you respect the seniority of your older sibling. This is very traditional as far as the Chinese are concerned. It is actually insisted on. There are even, names, terms that you call each other. There is a name for older brother and younger brother, and you use these terms talking to them, so nobody forgets who is older and who is younger, and the respect that should be accorded them. And I used to think that this was, fussy, but this is obviously necessary, or you will get a lot of conflict if everybody thinks that they are equal to you and you think you are equal to them, and you can't get anybody to do anything, because they'll always say, "Who are you to tell me what to do?" And so nothing gets done. Or you tell lies to get them to do the thing you want them to do, because you don't have authority. Therefore, you resort to lies, and this is, I think, why women are known to tell lies a bit more than men, because of their traditionally inferior status. So the purpose of this moral education is once you teach them, once you make the 7 Noahide laws, or knowledge of the Noahide laws, compulsory, then people will get the idea. And it's a shame that in America, who in, I think, 1979 incorporated, established, founded, or whatever the word is, Education and Sharing Day. And it had all the 7 Noahide laws, and then they just threw it out one by one because I don't even know why that happened. And I know I spoke to a Chabad rabbi, and he said, "Oh, we don't have the 7 Noahide laws anymore, so you don't have to worry about the idolatry and blasphemy bit." So they diluted their principles, presumably because these anti-Semitic Christians were questioning it. Actually, I must check the answer to this, see whether it really happened. So, but I know they were aware of it, that it started off with all the 7 Noahide laws being mentioned, and then it ended with nothing being said about them at all. I suppose Vincent will know. But anyway, my point is that if you hold in your head the idea that God exists and punishes good and evil either in this life or the next, and created good and evil, then any suffering is punishment for sin. To stop suffering, you stop sinning, and then you solve your problem. For individuals as well as nations. So, for the West, who is going through a particular phase of dementia and degeneracy, it's obviously made a few mistakes in the last 50 years, shall we say. But I think it's really true that it is suffering from dementia because, nobody seems to know anything. They don't remember anything. And if you talk about them, they look at you like you're telling them some fairy story or something. There is no collective memory, no collective narrative that they understand and can respond to. So, all the bad things, you think it's going to happen, it has already happened. And, I just watched this video by a Rabbi Zobin, who was talking about how difficult it is for Jews. I should find that for you, really, because it asks a few questions. So it says, the turbulent world young people are facing. First question, what are the big issues young people face growing up? Well, wondering what to do with themselves, I guess, passing exams, getting along with their friends, not getting into trouble at school. And I suppose for Jews it would be even more difficult because they have a particular identity that they know is not quite the same as Gentile identity, and Gentile culture is at odds with their religious principles. So that would be a big issue facing young Jewish people growing up in Gentile countries, particularly if they're not righteous Gentile nations. Next question is, what are the big social pressures young people face? Well, it's the usual peer pressure that we've all been warned against. If your friend jumps off a cliff, will you be doing the same thing too? The sort of thing that, we will say our friend has this, and parents allow that, and we want to, you use that as an argument for your parents giving you the same thing, and your parent will say, well, if your friend jumps off the cliff, are you going to do the same thing too? You're not getting it, whatever it is you were asking for. So you need firm parents who are prepared to say that to you. But unmarried single mothers are probably not up to the job of saying no. Or even if they were, they would, lose the ability once their child became as tall as they are, if they didn't teach them how to respect their parents. So, I'm afraid, that the more of these people than there are, children brought up in homes with fathers. And the government won't do anything about it, which is another sign of dementia and degeneracy. And then, what are the men doing about it? They don't care, which is another sign of dementia and degeneracy. What are the Jews doing about it? They're wringing their hands. It's quite an interesting video, really, because parts of it make sense, but they're not really. They don't really have the answer. I mean, the answer for them would be secular Quranism, but maybe they're not up to saying that yet. So, third question: we aren't giving young people meaning and purpose. Now this is from a Jewish standpoint, and the question of nihilism was also discussed. Fancy that. So I guess they're not really talking about. Were they talking about nihilism amongst Jews? Well, that's very bad, isn't it? But nihilism is a product of atheism, and it is because of Jewish emancipation that has actually caused a problem. So all Jews must have thought, isn't it nice that the Gentile has said we can become full citizens in this country instead of just being, residents with fewer rights. This has caused problems with their tendency to assimilate. So maybe it's always been the case that Jews should never be given equal citizenship. So they have to make a stark choice about whether they're going to hold on to their citizenship and hold on to their Jewish identity and never become a citizen, because if they did become a citizen, then they would have the same rights, and having the same rights would make them more likely to assimilate than not having the same rights. And it's not even a question of them wanting to or not, but whether this is something God would approve of or not. And it seems really that no one really has the right to emancipate Jews but God. And he will only emancipate them when they go about it the proper way, and they're not allowed to retire from the job before they have done what they were chosen by God to do. And they haven't really worked out what it is that they're supposed to do. And although I've told them quite a few times, they don't seem to be very receptive to my idea. So Jewish emancipation has been bad for the character of the Jews, particularly, it's not been good for the character of the Gentiles either, because the Gentile, having lost their belief in the Trinity, only pretends to believe in Christianity. So, perhaps they did, even when obviously I don't really know whether Christians in bygone centuries really believed that Jesus was God, but I guess they must have tried. They must have tried, and then And even if they privately didn't believe, they would not be telling everybody that they didn't believe because of the penalties of so doing, i.e., being burnt at the stake. So at least they kept quiet about their disbelief until it became legal to deny the Trinity without suffering punishment for blasphemy. So going back to these little headings for this video that I've just seen about, by Jews, and so they were talking about, we aren't giving young people meaning and purpose. We, meaning Jews, aren't giving young Jews meaning and purpose. And well, this would be quite disturbing, isn't it? It's like, well, you're a Jew, you've chosen to do something, and they don't even talk about that anymore. They're too embarrassed, maybe. There's this sort of cultural cringe now. It's like, we don't want to do this thing. We can't even bring ourselves to call ourselves God's chosen people because it's so cringe, right? So the next question is, how do we fix a negative youth culture? After talking about the nihilism of people. Well, you can only fix a negative youth culture, Jews, if you rank the 4 Gentile religions according to their conformity with the Noahide laws. I'm afraid Rabbi Zobin didn't say anything about that. You see, they're not even thinking politically now. It's like, how do we survive this terrible degeneracy without losing our identity? And there was a moment when Rabbi Zobin actually said, well, I like living here. So he doesn't want to move to Israel in the way that Sam is all. Yeah, I'll have to post this. Yes. I think he will watch it. The turbulent world young people are facing, I'm sure he will watch it because, well, he has a 10-year-old boy. And when he watches it, he will probably be a little annoyed at Rabbi Zobin, who doesn't really want to leave Britain and go and live in Israel. So I look forward to my next conversation with Sam. So the next topic in this video is, what if parents find conversations with their kids difficult? Well, why would they? Because the kid is not being respectful, because it's playing with its phone, or because the parent himself wants to play with a phone, with their own phone. Maybe they've lost the ability to communicate properly with so many years of mobile phone. It's ironic, isn't it, that you get this device that's supposed to help you communicate, and then you can't really communicate with your kid. Or even cultivate the art of conversation. You have to keep trying, even though the kid is sulky and with a Well, I suppose what you have to do in these circumstances is to make your point quickly and make sure it understands, right? And this is just one of the, burdens of being a parent. You want to make your point. You don't want to lecture them and make them. Well, sometimes it doesn't work. If you go on too long, people don't really listen. But if you just say it in a sentence, they might remember. And the next topic is, why is family so important? Obviously, it's important not just to Jews but to Gentiles, because being with a group of people that you spend a lot of time with reinforces your sense of identity. They will remember, things you did years ago and either praise you or tease you for it. So, but whether it's complimentary or not so polite, the people around you who remember what you did a long time ago are the people who reinforce your sense of identity. And finally, how can young people grow religiously in a healthy way? Obviously, it would help if they had a religion in the first place, so Jews have the advantage over atheists. But what I thought this list of questions has made clear is the importance of having a religion, even if you don't believe in God. And it's very sad how people don't care or get it. Because as I've explained earlier, if you hold in your head this system, this narrative of sin and suffering and punishment and repentance, and you would know how to stop your pain and your suffering. And it would take a much shorter time than fighting others to get your solution heard. It would be easier than I'm finding it. Midnight Rider, you have a few interesting things to say. Midnight Rider, as the youngest of many brothers, our relationship now as adults is very frayed and frankly non-existent. Respect has to go both ways. Some people are impossible not to argue with. I don't know how old you are, Midnight Rider, but I used to be quite argumentative. I still am argumentative. I guess I'm saying I can deal with these situations better now than before. When, sometimes you just know when to shut up. When you're younger, you don't. You just want to, fight every fight going. And what do you do when you deal with, family members who are really annoying and who always trigger you? I mean, I know my mother used to do that until I worked out a way of not reacting to her constant provocation. But I think once you form the desire to not argue with them, or okay, maybe not argue with them. Maybe you just think, well, I don't, I want this occasion to be a pleasant one, and a pleasant occasion would be for us to not argue, and therefore I will make a point of not saying certain things when provoked. That if you give it a bit of thought and you kind of sort of go and say, well, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to stick to my guns. It's a kind of principle in a way, isn't it? I'm not going to be the one to start the fight. You could make it that way, or I'm not going to be the one to respond to provocation. And I know what they're going to say. They're going to say this about that and that about this, but I'm not going to rise to their bait. And so, as they say, forewarned is forearmed. Midnight Rider says peer pressure is massive in Western society regarding doing self-destructive things. Self-reliance and independent thought is a strong character trait to give to a child. Let a child stand on their own feet. But yes, it's easier said than done. And I think the only way they can do it properly is if you teach them how to reason. And I think the only way you can teach them how to reason is to yourself behave in a consistent way. So if you tell them not to do something, you're going to behave in a certain way when they do a certain thing. So they not, if they want to please you, then they'll do this thing that will please you, because you've shown that you like this thing that they do, and same idea with the thing that you don't want them to do. So they know what to expect, and once they understand how the thing, how these things work in their own household, they'll more easily be able to apply that principle of, working out what the rules are, and arranging their lives to work within those rules to achieve the best results. The whole mobile phone obsession has warped people a lot. Yes, it becomes passive entertainment, and also there's this sort of rush to getting likes. I was actually with somebody older than me, and it was somebody I met on Facebook, and I guess a few people that we knew on Facebook knew that we were meeting, and then and then he posted us meeting on his Facebook profile, and checked for likes in a way that I guess I would never do, but it's easy. I guess it's easy to get that way. But I guess I sort of knew that it's not really about getting likes. It's nice to get likes, but you just have to take it on the chin. And as all these small numbers of viewers, I have to content myself with the idea that it's good enough that there are some people in the chat, right? It's better than no viewers. And what else? In theory, even if it's one viewer, if it's the most important viewer, if it's a viewer that can, do something for you, then why would you complain? One viewer who can do stuff for you is better than 10,000 million viewers who won't do anything for you at all. So yes, it has rather ruined the powers of concentration for many people. Notifications on our cell phones and everywhere else. Yes, I know siblings who don't get on, you know, from my own family and also from, other people's families. And okay, oh yes, I was going to tell you about, well, we're taking a step back. And of course, you might think it's a kind of metaphor, right? Taking a step back and not getting angry and all that. But what I mean is sort of imagine your mind behind your eyes, I guess, because that's where we think our mind is located. We imagine our mind taking a step back and looking at whatever situation it is more impartially. We take a step back, we get a longer perspective, we see a little bit more. So the thought of doing that will give you that necessary emotional distance to not react in an emotional way. So, to sum up, moral education is knowing the Noahide laws, ranking the four Gentile religions, understanding why Christianity is idolatry and blasphemy, understanding why Islam is the most Noahide of all Gentile religions, understanding that Buddhism is less offensive to God than Hinduism, but that Christianity is most offensive to God if he exists. And then we just have to, make sure that people speak the truth and are able to formulate, are able to distinguish between valid and sound arguments. So that's my syllabus for moral education. Thank you all for listening.